Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I am Darrell Scott. Sometimes this show has great fortune. I get to interview Ragan Whiteside. I can say this. She's beautiful. So it's beauty, talent, and she plays the flute. Ragan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. The key thing is making people laugh, and I do that pretty well. So you play the flute. So I've talked to a couple of other flute players. Why did you pick the flute? How did you and the flute get together?
Well, I didn't pick it. I guess it picked me in a way. Um, I was playing violin and drums, and I wanted to be in this parade that was marching through my town. I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, and this parade, it was all of the school bands from all of the elementary, middle school, and high schools, and it was a big deal every year. And I saw it, and I was like, "Oh my God, I really need to be in this parade. I wanted to be in this parade more than anything on this planet."
Mm-hmm.
And I was about 8. And so when I got to the 4th grade, they were like, well, if you want to be in this parade, you got to pick a band instrument, violin. You can't march with a violin. Okay. So I said, all right, so give me some drums. And they're like, well, we don't have enough drums and all the boys want to play it, so pick something else. And I said, okay, let me get a trumpet. We're out of trumpets. I
Jeez.
said, okay, you know what do you have left? And they said a flute and a clarinet. And I was like, I don't want to play either one of those. So, so I didn't feel like dealing with reeds. And so I picked the flute. And it took me about a week to get a sound out of it. And once I did get a sound out of it, I started to like it. I started to play more. I started to get good at it. And I just kept rolling with it.
So I've heard the stories of when you play the flute in the beginning. What did they say? You don't breathe. I don't say you don't breathe properly. You are breathing properly, but half of the air goes in the flute, the other half goes into space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everybody says you get a little dizzy, you get a little lightheaded. How did you overcome that?
Just practice. The more you do it and you develop those muscles to be able to control how much air is actually coming out instead of just blowing and blowing and blowing until you pass out. But because I've seen people do that. But it's after a while your body gets used to it, and and the dizziness. I haven't been dizzy in quite some time, so.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if you're learning to play this and you're 8 years old, which is another question I'll have in a minute, would you not get discouraged? Why did you stick with it despite the fact that you had the ability to pass out?
um, I well, I don't let anything beat me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people who is like, oh no, I'm going to master this.
Right.
And I liked instruments anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Anything I could get my hands on, I would play. So, to have this flute beat me and everybody else on my block could play and get a sound, they were like, toot, 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 toot. I'm like, what? How? So I wasn't gonna let it beat me. So I just kept at it. I guess that's my stubborn streak.
Yeah, stubborn. I know a little about that. Um, if if you have a style now, how did that style develop from when you began to play the flute to the style of which you have now?
I listened to a lot of different music. There was a lot of music playing in my house
Hmm.
coming up. Everything from Johnny Mathis to Rick James and everything in between. So, and having all of that, it was very eclectic, the music that was playing in the house, and it was all the time. The
Hmm.
record player was on all the time, and then it was the tape deck, and then, or just the radio or whatever.
Right.
So, it was just listening and of course private lessons later on. My flute teacher had a very specific kind of style. He was into the whole French style of playing, and so it
Hmm.
was very, very rich tone, very romantic sounding, and as opposed to any other kind of, very light and airy and no, he had a very rich, rich, deep tone, and he was inspired by Jean-Pierre Rampal. So of course I went and listened to him as well. And then, so that's on the classical side. And growing up in New York, of course, you would go to the Bronx and go to Tito Puente's, and Dave Valentine would be there.
Yeah, right.
And so Dave Valentine had, that whole Latin jazz, incredible, and also infusing some, Caribbean in there and some African rhythms in there, and everything would just kind of come together, and he would use his body in this incredible way. And that also influenced me. So I guess my sound now is kind of just an amalgam of all of those influences as I was coming up.
You mentioned Dave Valentine.
Mhm.
Are there any other influences while you're growing up other than perhaps Dave Valentine and your teacher?
Yeah, actually, I was into opera a lot when I
Wait,
was
hang on a second. Opera?
opera. Yeah, when I was in high school, especially like around the ninth grade, um, I don't know how they were able to swing this, but we were able to go to a lot of the dress rehearsals at the Metropolitan
Hmm.
Opera and in Lincoln Center. And I remember the first opera I ever saw was L'Elisir d'Amore, and it was Kathleen Battle and Luciano Pavarotti. And and we got a chance to go backstage and meet them.
Hmm.
And it changed my whole world. And to watch Kathleen Battle, who was at the time probably about 110 pounds. She's so tiny, right? And and but she filled up this theater with this voice that was just incredible, and her stage presence was just, she was, I don't know, she and I may be the same height. I might have her by a few inches, and I'm not that tall. So, but to have her just fill up this whole theater with her presence and her voice
Hmm.
was really it was inspiring. And so that, and then of course, that opened up the door to listening to Jesse Norman.
Right.
And I mean, it just, Leontine Price and all kinds of just different aspects of opera. And it was just really, it was inspiring. And so that also was kind of swirling around in my style.
This is kind of like a jambalaya stew. I'm just
Yeah.
going to throw everything into it and let's see what comes out. It's going to taste good. It's going to be good. But just from the things you've said, if we take the ingredients that you've given us, there's not a whole lot of jazz vibes going on, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Um, so I wonder, how do you navigate with opera, classical, and don't get me wrong, we're going to play some of your music here in a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
You're I'm just trying to figure out how do we get to, for lack of a better term, you being the stew.
Well, it's and I did listen to a lot of jazz. Don't get me
Hmm.
wrong.
Okay.
That was also played in the house
Okay.
a lot. I mean, I was that kid that was, blasting Ella Fitzgerald and then turning around and blasting the planets and then turn around and, and then rock Janet Jackson. And, it was very eclectic. So yeah, but I was on this classical track for a very long time. I went to a conservatory. I got my degree in classical music performance and graduated and didn't want to do classical music anymore.
Are your parents happy with you at this time?
Oh, well, they 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 were a little miffed, but they also knew that I have a lot of drive and, whatever it was that I decided to do, I would be okay. So they were supportive, but they were definitely giving me some side eye there for sure. But
I read in a bio in some point, you spent some time at the Cleveland Institute of Music. Was that here in
yes,
town?
that was in Cleveland, Ohio. How did I get
If
from
I,
New York to Ohio? No.
well, that's one question, but I want to ask questions about some of the people I know that have worked there. But
Mhm.
that also might give away your age, and I don't want to do that. I just don't. So maybe we'll talk about that once we're done.
Whatever.
But what how did you get from New York to Cleveland? And what
Mhm.
did you get out of the Cleveland Institute of Music?
Okay, so growing up in New York, you're kind of it's kind of ingrained in you, maybe not directly, but it's
Hmm.
just the vibe of it is that New York is the be all end all of the earth.
Correct.
And I needed to get out and see something.
Hmm.
I did not want to, I didn't even audition for Juilliard or Manhattan
Hmm.
or whatever. And everybody was looking at me like I'm crazy, but I didn't want well, okay, I'm going to date myself now. I grew up watching A Different World, right?
Okay. Hmm.
And that whole college experience of going away, living
Hmm.
in a dorm, the whole thing, I was about it,
Hmm.
and so I did not want to go to school 20 minutes from my parents' house.
Okay.
I don't care if it was New York, I
Right.
whatever. So I wanted to go to, school as far away as I possibly could go.
Hmm.
And my parents were like, no, but we're gonna find something that's far enough away, but close enough
Close
that,
enough. Right.
So it came down to a school in Pennsylvania and a school in Ohio. And I ended up going to the school in Ohio.
Okay.
So the Cleveland Institute of Music was an incredible experience. Um, I learned a lot about politics. I
Hmm.
learned a lot about, um, at the time, what it meant to be a Black classical musician.
Hmm.
Um, and it was, I, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. And eventually I did transfer
Hmm.
from that school to another school in Florida. And I learned a lot there too. That school was called the Harrod Conservatory, which
Hmm.
is now part of Lynn University. But there they only accepted enough students for an orchestra. So there were
Okay.
only about 80 students in the whole school.
Hmm.
And I played so much there and I learned so much. And I probably learned too much because then it made me say, okay, now this ain't it.
All right. Before I ask a question about somebody who went there, let's listen to Thrill Ride uh, by the lovely and obviously talented. I'm keeping people in suspense. Ragan Whiteside. that's thrill ride, and so far this vocal journey that you and I are going on is a thrill ride. You've lived to this point a very interesting life. It's very good. I like this, and it's good to hear that you kind of had a normal life. You know what I mean? Sometimes I think
Mhm.
we have musicians who they're they're treated differently, but yours is, and then the decisions you have to make based upon instruments, based upon your parents, based upon where you want to go to school, and then how far you want to go.
Mhm.
Here's another tough question, I think, and I've been doing this a lot lately because um, I'm curious. Women in jazz, how do you feel about that term? Because I've had all kinds of answers.
Mm.
Um, um, I realize it's tough because I've also heard the male side. I've heard what men have said about this. But when you are really good, and
Mhm.
you are really good, does that break down barriers? Is it easier? Is it tougher? Is it tough to maintain, I guess is the real question I want to ask.
Hmm. Um, well, let's start here. When I walk into a room and nobody knows who I am or what I do,
Hmm.
um, there is a very big misconception, especially when I walk up there with this little flute case and they're like, "Oh, that's cute." And and I have a lot of proving to do. And it's like I feel like I have to prove myself all the time,
Hmm.
you know. Not so much now, because I've been out here for a little while. My reputation has, been, I don't know, it's fairly solid, I guess, in certain circles. And so when I go up there, it's not so much that I have to prove myself so much anymore. I
Hmm.
don't have to like go for blood every time because there was a
Hmm.
time where I had to, every time I stepped on that stage, I had to go for blood and I had to just
Right.
wear it out.
Hmm.
And that was the only way I was going to get any kind of second look,
Hmm.
you know. And it's very competitive out here because then
Well,
after a while, because then, it's like after a while, it's like, okay, they don't see a chick with a flute anymore. They see a
hmm.
musician and they know that this musician is gonna bring it and go for blood.
Right.
And so, it kind of just turns into a general, I hope, equal competition,
Hmm.
if people are competing. Honestly, I'm tired of competing. It's
Hmm.
it's it's it has it just you expel so much energy, and sometimes you just want to just get out there and play and enjoy yourself without having to wonder, oh, do I have to outplay this one? Is this one,
Hmm.
trying to ah and it's nice to be able to get to a point where you can just get out there and play and enjoy yourself and not have to worry about somebody judging you
Hmm.
because of X, Y, and Z.
Well, I think your resume, you had what, 8 consecutive #1 hits on the Billboard chart or something like that?
Yeah, 8 or 9. Yeah.
9.
Mm.
That to me that means something. That means obviously the people who are listening to you are, I don't want to say care, but they understand what you're doing, and your music is really, really good. I mean, really good.
Yeah.
Um, but this whole thing, because I've talked to a few people, and I'm like, can I come through this screen and take a bat to your head? Because you're not paying attention. If you just if you just listen to the music, if you I did this one time. I was a big fan of the late David Sanborn.
Mm.
I'd seen him a bunch of times, and I went to this place that the hall was acoustically beautiful. So Knucklehead here goes and sits in the very last row of the theater. Like the thing that's behind me is the wall
Mm.
because I don't go necessarily to concerts to see people. I go to hear.
Mm.
So I'm sitting back and I'm with a buddy of mine, and he's like, you're just weird. And I'm literally, I'm resting my head up against the wall. I got my eyes closed and I'm just listening.
Mm-hmm.
and it sounded so good. So I got the opportunity to meet David afterwards. We kind of knew each other. He goes, "I didn't see you." I go, "Well, because I'm in the back row
Mm-hmm.
listening." And he goes, "Thanks." Like, okay. I think sometimes musicians get that. I, it's just the thing where sometimes I just want to hear. It's all I want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
could. I'm glad I have a filter in my head because I was going to say something and now I'm not going to say it because it would embarrass the both of us. But I think that sometimes you just want to hear the music, and if you're in the right place, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm I've had a few musicians ask me questions about their performance in the show and things like that, and I got a couple who are still pretty mad at me because I'm honest. Um, but the thing is, or the mix. I went to a concert over the weekend, and I couldn't hear the person singing because the
Mm-hmm.
mix was horrible, and I want to hear that person singing. I don't. The drummer's fine, but you're not the drummer on the show. You're helping this person out. Um, I I've watched some of your stuff on YouTube and everything. I don't care if I call you up and you go, Darrell, you're sitting in the front row center. I go, I'm going in the back. I just want to listen. Um, what do you do to maintain this creativity that you have of consistently being in the top of the charts all the time? Where's that creativity come from? And is there I can now understand your competitive edge because are you now going, oh, I got to do another song. It's got to be number 10 on this list. And then I got this song. It's got to be number 11 on this list. Are you that competitive?
No. Asterisk. Okay. Um, all right. So as an independent musician, you have to know where your money is coming from and how
Mm-hmm.
to make money at
Right.
music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you finish recording, doing the album artwork, hiring a radio promoter, hiring a publicist, and all the things that go on with releasing music.
Mm-hmm.
In order to break even, you need to get in the top 20 on that chart.
Really?
You do. There is, just from a radio standpoint, yeah, you can do gigs and you can sell your CDs and whatnot, but when you're pushing a song to radio, in order to break even, you really do need to be in that top 20.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then to make a little money, you need to get into the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, you're kind of building up to,
Right.
you know, and I mean, and it's all a process, I had a bunch of songs that, you know, we didn't chart. Oh, we charted. Oh, we're getting a little higher on the chart. And then it built,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, so yeah, when we're, because this is a business at the end of the day.
Right.
And so when we're writing, yeah, we're I have 2 kids and a mortgage, man. I guess yeah, we're shooting
Right.
for that top 10.
Right.
Sure.
Life still goes on.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a quick pause and listen to some more of your music, a song called Reminiscing, which is from when I was growing up. Um, I wonder how you found the song because memory serves me correctly, that came out in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe. And you ain't that old. But here's Reminiscing by Ragan Whiteside on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. real quick, you mentioned two things which I don't know dates us both. You mentioned record player and turntable. There are
Hmm.
people out there that have no clue what either one of those are.
That's a shame.
Um, you mentioned that you're an independent artist now.
Hmm.
Did you start out that way? If you started that way, why, when you had this elephant in the room called the record company that could assist you in so many different ways?
Because nobody would give me a record deal. And when I first came out, when I had my first record and I just heard about 1,000 no's. I heard that flute doesn't test well. I heard all kinds of things. And I said, okay, well, I'll just do it myself then. And I just kept doing it. And thankfully, technology has progressed in a way where the tools are there for you to be able to do this. Is it hard? Yeah.
Hmm.
When you sign with, I mean, it's there are pros and cons to both.
Right.
Owning your masters is the biggest pro of
Hmm.
being an independent musician. Um, but the record labels and that machine,
Hmm.
that machine is the pro over there. And, as an independent musician, you're trying to create your own machine. You almost have to reinvent the wheel.
Hmm.
And so that makes it a lot harder. Now, you get a record company and they give you a deal and they pretty much own you
Right.
until you have fulfilled your obligations for however many albums you're supposed to create for them. But you get the right kind of deal and you they blow you up and
Hmm.
then you have completed your obligations. You can go on and be independent
Right.
using everything that the record label built up for you, and you can just go on about your business and pretty much ride on that wave of um, notoriety that the label created for you. Now, as an indie, which I have been the entire time, um, it's hard. It's hard. Um, and would I take a deal if it's the right deal? Yeah.
Hmm.
You know, um, I actually was offered a deal within the last couple of years and I turned it down. Uh,
Hmm.
no regrets. And I'm not even mad at it, and hopefully they're not mad at me.
Right.
But, it wasn't the right thing for me at the
Right.
time.
At the time.
Yeah.
Um, I think of the record company being a wheel with many spokes, whether it's marketing, promotion, what all those different things. How do you now, how did you learn about all of that? Are you still learning? And I mean, do you have your own promotions company? Do you have your own marketing team? Um, do the whole thing about studios being in houses and you all, I talked to somebody, we recorded two vocal tracks in New York. The other two members of the group live in California. They sent it to them, they mixed it, then they sent it over to Germany for the orchestra, and they sent it back to LA to for the rhythm section. I this sounds really weird. I grew up with all of you all being in the same studio. So if somebody hit a note or did something that they like, they might give you a look and you keep going, or you can say, you know what, I don't like that. We need to do a little touch here.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be no interaction, we'll say,
Mm-hmm.
uh, when you're recording the product, and which I now think makes the live shows even better because you can turn and look and go, you can try things in rehearsals and things like that. Even with rehearsals, people are coming in from all over the country to
Mm-hmm.
rehearse. Um, has that been a growing pain for you?
No, it's it's actually been kind of helpful because
Oh, okay.
it's a lot cheaper to be able to have
Hmm.
somebody record in their home studio and it
Right.
sounds, as long as they're, fully equipped to,
Hmm.
record it at a certain level, otherwise you have to rent a studio, rent studio time. You have to pay the person who's going to be recording you. You have to fly that musician in. You got to put them up. You got to pay them for the thing, and and then pray to God that you actually get the take.
Right. Yeah.
So I would love to be able to do like a live album in a live studio album in that.
Hmm.
I mean, there is definitely something to be said for everybody being in the same room. I had a rehearsal yesterday and it's like, gosh, this would be so great if we were just able to just
Hmm.
really lay this down. But it's often just more cost effective
Yeah, I
to
get it.
have everybody do it separately. It's not
Un-
ideal, but
okay.
you know,
Until Darrell can build a castle that has 8 studios in it and kind of has a suite of apartments that you all can stay in and a restaurant and a gym and everything. And then everybody can just fly into town and do their own thing.
that'd be
Okay,
awesome.
let me wake up now and come back to the real world. I know that's not gonna happen. Um, I understand you have a name for your band, Fam?
Yeah, that's my New York band.
I'm thinking it's short for family. That's the only thing I could
Yes.
come up with. How did we get that name?
Oh, the fam. These guys were with me from the very beginning. And it really was like a family kind of thing. I mean, when they would come over to my parents' house and we would rehearse in the basement. My mom would make chicken wings. And then after rehearsal, everybody would just come upstairs and just grease. And
Nice.
and it was like, it was really like a serious family situation.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you have 2 kids. So you have 2 kids, you have a music career, a studio in the house. You have to rehearse, you have to practice.
Hmm.
How are you managing your time?
Uh-huh. It's a constant it's a constant struggle. I have a room, so we have the studio downstairs, and then I have a writing room upstairs that is as padded up as I could get it so
Hmm.
that I can practice when I can.
Right.
Um, Otherwise, if I know that the kids are going to be asleep and everything, I'll just go into my closet and, do what I can do, and just kind of real quiet.
Right. Yeah. That should be a show on HGTV. How musicians have converted their homes into studios.
Mhm.
I got an idea now. Um, yeah, I have many ideas when I talk to you musicians. Like, hey, if you got a song that you're trying out and you're not sure how it sounds, you can send it to me and I can give you my opinion. I got 3 people. I got 3 people right now who do that, and one didn't take me seriously, and she sent it to me, and I had this little list of things. She's like, I really didn't think you would do this, but these are pretty good. I, you know, I, I can't show you my office, but there's CDs here, records over here, more CDs over there. I was in radio probably before you were born. Um, what what's coming out new for you? What is next on your horizon?
Well, I have a new album coming out in August,
Hmm.
and that's going to be called Ragan. And it's the first album that I'm doing without a day job. So it's kind of like it's a new thing for me because every single album I've done up to this point, I've done it with a full-time day job or two.
You know I'm gonna ask. What was the day job?
Um, I was a software engineering manager, and I would do websites and I would manage teams, and yeah, I was
Do
I was hardcore into the IT thing.
do you know Carla Leal out of Houston? I think she's a guitar player, maybe a bass player. She still has a full-time job being a software engineer.
Mm,
I am amazed once again, the era I grew up in, musicians were just musicians. They didn't have side hustles. That's what I would call what you're doing. They didn't. But now understanding the way, trying not to cast evil, I understand how streaming works.
Hmm.
Don't agree with it.
Hmm.
Um, but now there's a lot. My Michigan team is all teaching at Eastern Michigan, Michigan State, a couple other places. Um, but everybody now it seems that all of you have side hustles.
Mm.
Every single person. I don't get me wrong, I get why, but s- hearing some of the side hustles is what is amazing to me.
Hmm.
Um, so you already had a computer background before you became this independent person. So you knew what software to get, how to use it, how to download it, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
Um, I wish you still design websites. I'd see if I could get a favor. Um, that's what I'm saying.
I barely have enough time to keep my website up to
I
date, but
I, I get it. Um, so tell us how our folks can follow you, keep up with you. Tell us about your website and your social media.
so RaganWhiteside.com is my website. And social media, Facebook is Ragan Whiteside Music, and Instagram is Ragan Whiteside. I'm trying to keep up with TikTok. And I do have a TikTok, but it's like I put up a video when I can remember. So
Uh,
it's
I,
hard, man.
I, I I've only graduated to Instagram and Facebook because it's enough.
Hmm.
Um, and my stepdaughter who's around the corner sitting on the couch with her dog, and I'm surprised he hasn't come in here. Why don't you go on TikTok? I'm having a tough time managing Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it
Hmm.
serves my purpose. I'm going to tell you once your music comes out and whatever you got, get me a copy. It'll go up on my social media and I'll put it everywhere and I'll do whatever I can.
Thank
Um,
you.
we will negotiate with somebody to bring concerts here to Cleveland because all want to come to Cleveland. Right now, I got no venues, but we're going to work on that. I would appreciate if we could stay in touch and just
Yeah.
promote your music, promote what we do. Cleveland used to have we had a place called the Front Row Theater, which probably did one or two jazz shows a month. We have three theaters downtown, but they concentrate on. We just hit the Tri-C Jazz Fest. We have a
I
place called
remember
Tame.
Nighttown. Is
Not yet.
Nighttown still there? I
Nighttown
used
is
to live
still there.
around the
It's on.
corner from there. Yeah.
You wait. Say that again. I
I
wasn't
used to
sure I
live
heard.
around the corner from Nighttown.
You were high up on my list till that comment. That means you lived here in Cleveland, and I didn't know who you were. But that's okay. That's fine. We'll begin this relationship now.
When I
Um,
was in school, I mean, it was right
right.
there. It wasn't too far from the university.
And that was Jim Wadsworth was the guy who was the promoter of Nightown, and Jim and I are still good friends, and we're in touch. But the thing is, we're both old. Um, I think not enough people know about jazz, the people who play it, how they got there. That's where this show comes into effect. And we know we sprinkle in a little music because we can't play whole songs because they just won't let us.
Hmm.
Um, but this is fun getting to know people and getting to know artists and understanding some of the idiosyncrasies that you've had and finding out that you lived in Cleveland and went to school in Cleveland.
Hmm.
Um, if we talk enough, we'll find out that we each know a whole bunch of people. So once the new product comes out in August, I hope to be on a mailing list of some kind to get it so we can put it out there. And whatever else you're doing, whatever else you got going on, we will post it and we will go from there. Ragan Whiteside, folks, let me tell you, I think that's the coolest name around. I really think that name you could be a superhero. I really do. I really do. It's just, it, and you almost want to do the Bond thing, Whiteside, Ragan Whiteside. Um,
I like it.
okay, hey, well, at some point you just give me a credit. I'm a point guard. I just need an assist. Um, but I greatly appreciate this time. It is a pleasure to get to know you. I will keep up with your work. We'll play your work, um, and let people know that you're out there. And hopefully, at some point in the next few years, we'll see you here in Cleveland.
I would love that. And you know what? Thank you so much for having me on your show, and thank you so much for what you do for musicians, especially in
Thank
this
you.
genre. It's important, and you're doing some important work
I,
here.
I'm doing the best, as I say, I'm doing the best I can with what little I got. It's growing. Actually, you will be show 51.
Nice.
We have the schedule in May. So we haven't been out a year. We got some
Mhm.
pretty good numbers. We are growing. The toughest thing to do is trying to track you guys down and get you to sit down for 40 minutes. Because I understand that um, you're touring constantly, and I've already heard we don't do media when we're on tour. Okay, I get that. Um, but it is funny. Some people that, and I just sent you an invitation, and you graciously decided to be a part of this. But some people are funny. Um, we'll talk about that after the show's done. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Ragan Whiteside. More music to come. We'll keep you abreast of what's going on. Ragan, I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you very much. We're gonna have some
Thank
fun.
you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.